He won. He spent weeks planning it. Every angle calculated, every contingency mapped, every step in a sequence only he could see from start to finish. He walked into that forest knowing exactly how it would end. It ended exactly how he planned. And there is nothing. No relief. No sense of completion. No version of peace waiting on the other side of it. Just a man sitting alone in the dark, holding someone else's cigarette, and the slow weight of understanding that he has become the thing he spent his entire life refusing to be. This is not a story about a lazy genius who finally lived up to his potential. This is a story about a man who understood, earlier and more clearly than anyone around him, exactly what greatness costs, and who decided, rationally, deliberately, and without cowardice, that the price was too high. The world had other plans. Before we talk about Shikamaru, we need to talk about a choice you think you've made. You've told yourself a story about who you are. About what you want, what you've decided to pursue or not pursue, what kind of person you've chosen to become. That story feels like yours. It feels authored. What Shikamaru forces us to examine is not whether the story is true. It's whether you wrote it. How much of who you are now was decided? And how much was accumulated, through the things you lost, the responsibilities that arrived without your consent, the doors that closed until the only self remaining was the one you'd learned to inhabit? He wanted an average life. An average wife. 2 children. A quiet death before his wife, so he wouldn't have to watch her go. Not from lack of imagination. Not from fear. He had looked at what ambition did to the people around him and he made a philosophical decision. The interesting part is not that the world overruled him. The interesting part is that you cannot tell anymore whether what he became was always waiting inside him, or simply what remained after everything else was taken. He had her. In the Chunin exams, fighting Temari, the shadow was holding her. He had won. He could see the next 8 moves. He knew the end. He conceded. Chakra exhaustion, he said. Not worth the trouble. The judges promoted him anyway, the only genin in his cohort to make Chunin that year, not because he won, but because his mind was so visible even through the concession that there was nothing left to test. He tried to lose. He failed at losing. Because you cannot unhave what you are. There is a philosopher, Schopenhauer, whose central argument is that the will is the one force in existence that does not negotiate. Not your will. The will. The blind, purposeless drive that underlies everything, that manifests in humans as the hunger for recognition, for power, for legacy, for the sense of having mattered. He called it the Will zum Leben, the will to live, and his diagnosis was simple: it cannot be satisfied. Every achievement generates a new desire. The man who climbs the ladder finds another ladder. This is not a motivational problem. This is the structure of the thing. His answer was resignation. Not passivity, the word is technical. The deliberate philosophical decision to stop participating in the cycle. To silence what he called the quietive, the engine of wanting, before it carried you past everything worth keeping. Shikamaru arrived at this conclusion on his own. He looked at the world he'd been born into, ninjas whose greatness made them targets, teachers who poured themselves into students and died for it, fathers who became indispensable and therefore expendable, and he constructed a counterproposal. An average life. Deliberately, precisely, without apology. It is the most complete articulation of Schopenhauer's resignation I have encountered in fiction. He was perhaps 14. Then Asuma died. Asuma was the template. The man being built from the same materials. Skilled, beloved, necessary, and consumed. His father Shikaku was another, the most strategically gifted mind in the hidden leaf, essential to every major operation, a man whose brilliance made him a target that no one could protect. He died in the war. 2 men who carried the same gift Shikamaru had been trying to refuse. 2 funerals. There is nothing new in this. For in much wisdom is much grief, the preacher wrote, 3,000 years before any of this existed. Shikamaru did not discover something original. He arrived, alone, at a conclusion that wiser humans had reached long before him. That does not make him exceptional. It makes him lonelier. Schopenhauer wrote, "The will is the strong blind man who carries on his shoulders the lame man who can see." The blind man does not ask for directions. He does not slow down because the man on his shoulders says the road is wrong. He carries, and the seeing man goes where the carrying takes him. Shikamaru spent weeks alone in the Nara forest, not in grief's chaos, not in rage, but with the cold methodical patience of someone who has spent every waking hour of their life seeing the thing everyone else misses. Planning Hidan's burial. Step by step. No one watching. No glory at the end of it. The will he had tried to silence came back. Not as ambition. As Mitleid, Schopenhauer's word for compassion, literally suffering with, the moment when the will stops wanting for itself and recognizes its own suffering in someone else. This is the one exception Schopenhauer allowed. The one time the will is pointed outward rather than inward. And it is, paradoxically, the only thing Schopenhauer considered a genuine virtue. The resignation broke. Not because Shikamaru failed his philosophy. Because his philosophy had an exception, and Asuma's death walked through it. A man can do what he wants, Schopenhauer wrote. But not want what he wants. Shikamaru did exactly what he wanted. For years he chose the ordinary. What he could not choose was the wanting, the grief that arrived without asking, the need that had no answer except him. The trap was never his ambition. The trap was his clarity. Mendokusai. There is no clean English translation. What a drag is how subtitles usually handle it. But that doesn't carry the weight. It's not complaint. It's closer to a filing. A formal objection entered into the record with the full knowledge that no one is keeping the record. Every time he says it right before doing something only he can do. It is the ritual language of a man reminding himself and announcing to everyone present that he did not choose this. That his participation is reluctant. That somewhere inside him there is a version of the story where he said no. You do this. Maybe not out loud. But you have something you are very good at, something that finds you whether you reach for it or not. Something the people around you know to bring to you when it matters. Something you've learned to frame as an obligation rather than a desire, because calling it a desire would require you to admit you want it, and wanting it would make you responsible for the shape of your life in a way that refusing it does not. Think about the version of the ordinary life you were going to have. The quieter shape of things. The way you thought it would look before the sequence of necessary exceptions began. Before the thing you were good at started being needed. Before the needs became urgent. Before urgent became permanent. Think about when you stopped calling it temporary. Shikamaru said Mendokusai and then did the thing. Every time. Years of it. A ritual refusal with a 100% compliance rate. What's yours? Not the word. The gesture. The tone. The way you pick up the weight while communicating that you know it shouldn't be yours to carry, and carry it anyway. Completely. Better than anyone else would have. The question is not capability. You know your capability. The question is whether the person you have become is one you built, or one the circumstances built, while you were busy being too good at things you never asked to be good at. Here is the argument that deserves to be made. The dream of the average life was the philosophy of a teenager who had not yet been tested. A boy who had observed suffering from the outside, catalogued its costs, and concluded that the smart move was to stay where he was. That is not wisdom. That is the posture of someone who hasn't yet met what he is afraid of. When the world tested him, when Asuma died, when the war came, when the problems in front of him had no other solution, he did not break. He became. And by the end of the Fourth Ninja War, notice what has gone silent, Mendokusai. The ritual complaint. The formal objection filed with no one. It has stopped. A man doing something against his nature keeps signaling it. Keeps finding small ways to announce that his participation is reluctant. The signal is how he preserves the story. Shikamaru's signal was that word, repeated for years, a constant annotation in the margins of his own life: I did not choose this. But during the war, in the moments that mattered most, there is no annotation. There is only the work. Maybe that silence is the most honest thing he ever said. Maybe the resignation was never a philosophy. Maybe it was armor, worn by someone who knew, in a place he couldn't yet name, what he was capable of, and wasn't ready to be responsible for it. And maybe what the losses took from him was not his dream, just his excuse. This reading is honest. It earns its place here. But it requires you to accept that the self he arrived at was always the real one. That the desires underneath the indifference were these desires all along. Maybe. Or maybe a person can want something for long enough, with enough genuine intention, that when the wanting ends, when the losses accumulate and the alternatives disappear, what remains becomes indistinguishable from what was always true. The difference matters. It matters philosophically. It matters practically. It matters more for you than it does for Shikamaru. He won. He won the Chunin exams without wanting to compete. He won against Hedon without wanting to fight. He won against every version of the quiet life he had designed, won in the sense that none of them survived contact with who he was. What he could not win against was this: the world does not negotiate with your philosophy. Schopenhauer said the will is blind. He meant it precisely. It has no investment in your specific happiness, no record of your specific refusals, no patience for the distinction between the life you chose and the life that chose you. It operates through you regardless of your position on it. The man who sees it clearly is carried as far as the man who never thought about it at all. Shikamaru saw it clearly. It carried him anyway. This is what this story is: a man who did everything right. Who identified the mechanism, named it accurately, constructed a life in deliberate opposition to it, and found that the opposition did not change the outcome. He is not a failure. He is not a hypocrite. He is proof of something genuinely uncomfortable, that seeing the trap does not mean you can leave it. The cigarette in his hand is not a symbol of defeat. It is a receipt. If life keeps forcing you to use everything you have, even after you decided not to, even after you looked at what that costs and concluded the price was too high, even then, do you actually have a choice about who you become? Or do you just have a choice about how long you keep pretending you do?